Hi, it's Katrina. There is so much we don't know about ancient history, and there are many new things that are just getting declassified. From the KGB revealing secret truths of Egyptian aliens to the weird story of Sun Tzu's concubine army, let's check out some weird cover-ups and strange histories. The KGB and the Pyramids. To the ancient Egyptians, Osiris was the god of death. He was the deity who judged the dead and presided over the underworld. He was also the god of spring and fertility, due to the fact that he died and was resurrected. According to recently revealed KGB files from the Cold War, Osiris was a real being. He wasn't a god, but an alien who came from outer space and built the pyramids. Osiris was at the center of ancient Egyptian religion. They believed that he gave the gift of barley, an important crop for their survival. He brought resurrection in the springtime, resulting in the birth of new animals. But they also believed that Osiris was the original pharaoh. Legends from Egypt claim that Osiris came from a faraway place and brought civilization to the land. He introduced agricultural techniques and ruled Egypt as their first king. It was a time of great prosperity up until his brother Set killed him, ruining everything. But when Osiris was reborn, he was a god. Now, let's change our focus to the KGB, the main security agency for the Soviet Union throughout the Cold War. They were in operation from 1954 until 1991. One of the men who served as a scientific advisor for the KGB was Dr. Viktor Ivanovich. During his time with the agency, he supposedly came across files detailing a secret mission that was codenamed Project Isis. The project was aimed at finding out the truth behind Osiris and the other Egyptian gods. The KGB desperately wanted to know if the Egyptians were really ruled by extraterrestrials at the beginning of their civilization. In 2001, Victor said that the objective was to find and secure any potential knowledge that was given to early Egyptians from their alien rulers. So the KGB sent archaeologists to Egypt in search of answers. It's unclear what they found, or even if anything Victor said is true. There are a lot of rumors, and none of them are possible to substantiate. Some say that the Soviet scientists discovered an alien body within a great tomb that belonged to Osiris himself. Victor claimed that they found proof that the aliens built the pyramids, and also that Osiris and his alien comrades left behind a bloodline of alien-human hybrids to rule Egypt for nearly 5,000 years. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comments. And now it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Damien Joseph and Dark Pandora. Thanks so much for watching and spending time with us. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. The moon is hollow. Scientists claim that the moon is a small piece of our own planet that broke off during an intense celestial impact event. Something that was about the same size of Mars bounced off Earth, dislodging a chunk of material that would ultimately form into the moon. But some say that's just a cover-up. A new conspiracy theory gaining steam is that the moon is really an alien base. How could this be possible, though? One of the alleged pieces of evidence being used by the conspiracy theorists involves the size of the moon. It's true that the moon is a big anomaly in our solar system. Scientists have never been able to explain why a planet the size of Earth has such a huge moon when other planets don't. To explain that mysterious discrepancy, conspiracy theorists claim that the moon is actually an alien base. It's supposedly full of extraterrestrials who are covertly monitoring us right this very second. One part of the theory is that the Apollo 11 mission to the moon was an attempt to make contact with the aliens. The Salzburg Cube. In the 19th century, a very unusual artifact was discovered in Austria. It's known today as the Salzburg Cube. It's not really a cube, though. It's more like a giant chunk of iron. But if the theories are to be believed, the artifact is at least 16 million years old. And that's insane because the analysis of the material suggests that the Salzburg Cube is a piece of cast iron. Another name for the cube is the Wolf's Egg iron, named after where it was discovered in Wolf's Egg am Ausruck. When it was first removed from the ground and studied by scientists at the University of Bonn, they assumed it was from space. They thought it was a chunk that broke off of a meteor or something similar. But when that was ruled out, it became obvious that the artifact was a piece of metal. The unusual metal cube wasn't natural in any way, shape, or form. As a piece of cast iron, it must have been made by someone with access to technology. Yet it was found by a worker embedded in a block of brown coal in 1885. One of the theories is that the cube was made by an advanced society on this planet 60 million years ago. According to mainstream archaeologists, that's impossible. But do we really know that? There could have been a civilization of humans that emerged long before us that was far more technologically advanced than we give them credit for. The only parts of their society that are left are tiny bits of metal embedded in ancient coal seams. Diffusing Pompei. There's something a little scary happening at Pompeii that most visitors are completely oblivious to. For years, archaeologists have been quietly diffusing bombs all across the archaeological site. They say visitors aren't in danger, but is that true? Pompeii has been in ruins for nearly 2,000 years. Mount Vesuvius erupted in the year 79 AD, killing everyone within its reach and blanketing the Roman city in volcanic ash. It wasn't the last time Pompeii would be destroyed either. In 1943, the Allies dropped 165 bombs on Pompeii. This was during air raids to blast Nazi-friendly Italy during World War II. The Allies had received reports that German forces were encamped within the ruins. Knowing there were Nazis nearby, the Allies weren't too concerned about Pompeii's historical status. So they bombed that thing back into the Roman Empire. And since then, a lot of explosives have been removed from the site. So far, a total of 96 bombs have been deactivated, but there are still some bombs littering the empty lanes where Romans in fancy togas once walked. Right now, it's believed that there are at least 10 unexploded devices hidden somewhere in Pompeii. Of course, tourists aren't allowed within areas that haven't been thoroughly researched for bombs. It's not a cover-up, but they don't exactly announce the explosives at the gate either. They also don't openly inform visitors that 30 years ago, one of those bombs went off. Nobody was killed, but it was a pretty scary situation. Covering up giants. Massive humanoid skeletons have been found in almost every corner of the world, but whenever these giants are found, they seem to disappear very quickly. And this was exactly what happened to the remains of enormous humanoids that were found in the Ohio River Valley throughout the 19th century. The discovery of these giants was documented by historians and archaeologists, but then all mention of the giants suddenly disappeared. The belief today among many is that a large-scale cover-up swept the giant skeletons under the metaphorical rug. In 1841, several human skeletons were excavated from a mound on a private farm near Franklin, Kentucky. Most of these skeletons were preserved in their entirety. They were fully formed people, judging by their remains, and they were buried peacefully in graves. The issue was that they were huge. The thigh bones alone were 6 inches longer than the thigh bones of any average-sized person today. They seem to belong to giants who once roamed North America. The same thing was discovered in Joe Daviess County, Illinois, around the same time. Within 3 years, a series of mounds were excavated and pillaged of all they contained. Giant skeletons of people who stood at least 8 feet tall were taken from the mounds, but nobody knows what happened to them or where they are now. In West Virginia's Kanawha Valley, skeletons of people who grew between 7 and 8 feet tall were excavated from burial mounds in the village of Brownston. Similar skeletons were found in Florida, Louisiana, and all along the Mississippi River. This all happened in the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century. In almost every case, the giants varied between about 7 and 9 feet in height. They were typically dug out of the same kinds of burial mounds that were used by the ancient Hopewell and Mississippian cultures. Scientists in America throughout the 1800s couldn't stop hearing about giant skeletons. It was common knowledge that throughout the American Southeast were the remains of figures that weren't entirely unlike the Nephilim of the Bible. Samples from the mounds seem to suggest that the giants were buried as recently as 1,000 years ago. But then something happened. In the early 1900s, American archaeologists undertook a policy of flat-out denying the existence of giants. The giant skeletons were discredited, and it's unclear what happened to the dozens of recovered giant skeletons as well. Amateur anthropologists were blamed for wildly exaggerating reports. Rather than there having been a race of giants, The official narrative became that there had once been very tall Native Americans. Giants in America is by far one of the most controversial topics in archaeology because it's not beyond the realm of possibility. There are people alive right now that are more than 7 feet tall. Even early explorers like Ferdinand Magellan claim that they saw giants when they first visited the Americas. The bigger question is, why would scientists feel the need to cover up such a seemingly harmless truth? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. Sun Tzu's Prostitute Army. The Art of War is the most legendary book on military strategy ever written. But the story behind the man who created it is far weirder than most people realize. For example, the man behind The Art of War once raised an army of nearly 200 prostitutes. Sun Tzu was the author of The Art of War, supposedly penning the book of knowledge in the 5th century BC. Although the book is long and touches on a lot of subjects, The Art of War could be summed up with one sentence: get there first with more men. But who was Sun Tzu, and what made him such an authority on the art of combat? Nobody really knows. He's about as legendary as King Arthur, though. Historians from the ancient Han Dynasty claimed that he lived between 544 and 496 BC. He was a military strategist whose deeds are shrouded in myth. It's believed that he likely served under the rule of King Helu of Wu and earned many victories in battle, though what battles he fought are lost to history. In fact, Chinese scholars started doubting his existence 800 years ago because they couldn't find enough proof that he was a real person. It's his dubious origins that make the tale of his army of prostitutes impossible to prove. Maybe it happened, maybe not. But here's the legend anyway. Sun Tzu was trying to gain employment as a strategic leader for a king. The king said that to prove his worth as a military genius, Sun Tzu needed to convert his entire harem into a functioning legion of soldiers. If Sun Tzu could make 180 concubines a functional fighting force, he would gain the king's respect. So naturally, Sun Tzu accepted the challenge. The first thing he did was divide the concubines in half. The 2 favorite concubines of the king were made the officers in charge of their 2 groups. And of course, Sun Tzu was the commander of them all. The first thing he did after separating the groups was to get the concubines to assemble in front of the king. But when Sun Tzu gave them a command, they giggled and laughed. The concubines thought it was funny that they were being pushed into military service. They snickered and didn't do what Sun Tzu told them to. He tried again, giving them the same order in very clear terms. But still, they stood there and laughed. The next thing he did was order the 2 leading concubines to be executed. The concubines were killed and new officers were chosen from the remaining concubines. And the next time Sun Tzu issued orders, the women obeyed without hesitation. He never trained the concubines to fight a battle. Instead, what he did was prove to the king that strength doesn't come from physical prowess. It's not about equipment. He was able to make an army from the king's harem by being a firm, indomitable commander. The Art of War is still an extremely popular book after 2,500 years, regardless of whether Sun Tzu was real or if he rallied an army of concubines. Vietnamese communist leader Ho Chi Minh translated the work and gave it to his officers for studying. Many have attributed the disastrous failure of American forces in Vietnam to the Vietnamese fighters learning Sun Tzu's strategies. The 2 minutes of silence. I told you earlier about the conspiracy theory that the moon is an alien base being covered up by world governments. Now I want to tell you about the 2 minutes of silence during NASA's Apollo 11 mission. There are 2 trains of thought. One is that the mission never happened at all, and humans have never been to the moon. But the other train of thought is even crazier. The Apollo 11 mission touched down on the lunar surface on July 20th, 1969. Soon after, communications with Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were cut short. Dr. Michael Salla, whom you may have seen on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens, said that the gap in radio transmissions was very strange. For 2 full minutes, the public couldn't hear anything. Researcher David Childress says that's because the astronauts were talking about extraterrestrial objects on the moon. In particular, flying saucers parked at the edge of a crater like a couple of trucks parked outside of a Chili's restaurant. Mike Barra, another expert who's appeared on the History Channel, agrees with David's hypothesis. He claims that Neil and Buzz were obviously upset by something they saw within the first 30 minutes of their landing. And the reason there were 2 minutes of silence is that the astronauts switched to their private medical channels. The channels could only be heard by the astronauts at mission control. Then, within an hour of landing on the moon, rumors of alien ships were already circulating throughout NASA headquarters. But the rumors were watered down, and everyone was allegedly told to keep their mouths shut about the whole thing. Do you think there could be any truth here? Is it possible that NASA covered up their astronauts encountering aliens on the moon? Do you believe the moon is really a covert base for space aliens? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore in South Dakota receives 3 million visitors annually, but most of them don't know about the monument's secret door and chamber, and no ordinary tourist has access to it. Located within the mountain featuring 4 6-story tall busts of American presidents, the hidden room was originally meant to educate visitors on why the monuments are there. Gutzon Borglum, the monument's sculptor, originally wanted it to be a museum. Not wanting himself, his work, or the civilization it represents to ever be forgotten, Borglum started working on the secret chamber called the Hall of Records in 1938, 9 years after construction on Mount Rushmore itself began. According to his vision, an 800-foot staircase would lead visitors up to the room, but the U.S. government rejected the idea, and Borglum died before he could finish the monument or the room. The sculptor's son completed the sculptures, but the chamber was left unfinished. For decades, Borglum's family campaigned for the government to complete the room, and in 1998, the government conceded, sort of, by installing some porcelain tablets within it, detailing the construction of Mount Rushmore and its accompanying hidden chamber, the latter of which remains closed to this day. Niow Hawaii. Known as Hawaii's Forbidden Island, Niow is a privately owned 70-square-mile island located roughly 17 miles from the coast of Kauai. Its 130 or so residents lack modern plumbing, cars, stores, paved roads, and the internet. Their electricity is powered by solar and generators, and they spend their days fishing and farming. Alcohol and guns are banned, and everyone is allegedly required to attend church on Sundays. A Scottish widow named Elizabeth McHutchinson Sinclair purchased Niow in 1864 from the Hawaiian monarch King Kamehameha IV. She paid $10,000 in gold for the property and agreed to honor a very specific request from the king. Niow is yours, Kamehameha said, but the day may come when Hawaiians are not as strong in Hawaii as they are now. When that day comes, please do what you can to help them. Ever since, the island has remained largely off-limits to visitors for the sake of protecting Nihoans from foreign diseases and preserving their culture. Sinclair and her descendants, the Robinsons, have fought adamantly to maintain this status quo, even despite former Hawaiian Governor John Burns' attempts to evict the family from Niow. Burns wanted to turn the property into a public park and to integrate the Nihoan population with mainstream Hawaiian society. Today, Niow appears to be in serious decline. Only part-time work is available, causing more and more people to leave the island for better opportunities elsewhere. Niow's current owners, Brother Keith and Bruce Robinson, continue to resist any pressure to allow Nihoan culture to be jeopardized. There are boat and helicopter tours of the island, but they do not offer a first-hand glimpse at Pu'ai, the island's main settlement, out of respect for residents' privacy. Vatican's Secret Archives. The Vatican's Secret Archives, recently renamed the Vatican Apostolic Archives, contain 12 centuries worth of archives, amounting to millions of documents dating as far back as the 8th century. Altogether, the materials occupy around 53 miles of shelving, as well as an underground vault called the Bunker. Included among these fascinating documents are a letter that Mary Queen of Scots wrote to Pope Sixtus V, begging him to spare her life after she was sentenced to death by beheading, the papal bull excommunicating Martin Luther, and the minutes of the trial against the Knights Templar, known as the Chinon Parchment. The archive's new name is meant to gravitate away from the negative connotations of secrecy, but the secret archives are certainly not open to the public. Only qualified researchers who undergo an extensive vetting process are allowed into the facility, and documents less than 75 years old are inaccessible to scholars. As restrictive as these rules may seem, the secret archives rules have loosened considerably in modern times. Until 1881, when Pope Leo XIII opened the building to researchers, scholars were not allowed inside the building at all. The Pope is considered the rightful owner of the secret archive's contents and is the only person who can authorize the early release of documents. And while he demonstrates a more relaxed attitude than previous popes in many ways, Pope Francis refuses to budge when it comes to releasing materials that many scholars have campaigned for access to, specifically paperwork relating to the ongoing sexual abuse scandal that is plaguing the Catholic Church. Room 39, North Korea. Room 39 is a highly secretive North Korean organization that maintains the Hermit Kingdom's slush fund, which is estimated to bring in between $500 million and $1 billion per year, if not more. It's suspected of engaging in illegal activities, including manufacturing counterfeit currency and producing dangerous controlled substances such as opiates and methamphetamine, as well as illegal trading and international insurance fraud. Room 39 is likely critical to the Kim dynasty's continued power. It enables the supreme leader to buy political support, finance the country's nuclear weapons program, and live a luxurious lifestyle that stands in stark contrast to the reality of ordinary citizens, many of whom are destitute and relegated to deplorable living conditions. Current dictator Kim Jong-un's sister and possible successor Kim Yo-jong is reportedly in charge of Room 39's financial activities, but the clandestine organization is wildly successful in maintaining its secrets. So much so that U.S. intelligence has failed to fully determine the nature of its activities. Room 39's heavily guarded headquarters is located on the third floor of the Workers' Party building in Pyongyang. It is here that the agency handles funds generated from hotel stays in Pyongyang, trades in gold and zinc, and manages an estimated 120 legitimate front companies, including those involved in attaching Made in China labels to North Korean-made goods. Only one person who has ever been privy to this environment, a North Korean defector who spoke anonymously to ABC News, has offered the public a first-hand look at Room 39. He insisted he worked for a legitimate branch of the organization and claimed to have limited knowledge of its illicit dealings, leaving the world and its intelligence agencies on their own to figure out the rest. Heard Island, Australia. It would be difficult to violate the Australian government's ban against visiting Heard Island, which requires a week-long boat journey totaling 2,485 miles. The remote territory is home to a 9,000-foot-tall active volcano nicknamed Big Ben. It's the tallest mountain in Australian-owned territory, minus Antarctica. For around 360 days out of the year, Heard Island is shrouded by dense clouds. Generally speaking, only fishermen and research scientists visit the island, and those who've had the privilege of seeing it seem to think it's worthy of further exploration, but to keep human presence there to a limit so that we don't damage anything. Glaciologist Doug Thost told ABC humanity deserves to know a bit more about this place. It is a jewel in the southern Indian Ocean. I'd hate to see it loved to death, but I'd love to see it on Australia's list of things to do from a research perspective. That's kind of our problem, isn't it? We love things to death. He said that being in such a remote place is pretty humbling, but that you had to be really aware of potential danger because there would be very little chance of you getting rescued in time. The dangerous conditions on Heard Island are one reason it's not open to just anyone. Thost's colleague nearly died there several years ago when he fell into a crevice, and this represents just one of many dangers on Heard Island, where Thost once measured a 124-mile-per-hour wind gust. But safety hazards aren't the only thing that keeps the Australian government from allowing ordinary people to visit Heard Island. The territory is almost completely untouched by humans, and knowing it's better off that way, the authorities imposed a strict no trespassing policy. Heard Island, which became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1997, stands to offer valuable insight into how volcanoes form far away from tectonic plate boundaries. The phenomenon contributes to increased marine biodiversity in a region where very little exists to begin with, acting as an invaluable food source for aquatic species. All things considered, it's hard to disagree that humans should not be allowed to visit this pristine environment. CocaCola Vault. One of the world's most closely guarded secrets is the Coca-Cola recipe, which is kept inside a large security vault at the World of Coca-Cola Museum in Atlanta, Georgia. The elusive concoction dates back to 1886, courtesy of Dr. John S. Pemberton. But the recipe was not documented until 1919, when Ernest Woodruff and his investors purchased the rights to it. The recipe first went under lock and key in 1920, shortly after it was purchased. It was kept at a New York bank, and in 1925 it was transferred to the Trust Company Bank in Atlanta. It moved to its current location in 2011, after spending 86 years at the Trust Company Bank, which is now SunTrust. Today, visitors can enjoy elements of the recipe and its history via the museum's Vault of the Secret Formula exhibit, but the recipe itself remains a top-guarded secret. Do you prefer Coca-Cola or Pepsi? Do you think Pepsi's recipe is pretty close? Let me know in the comments below. Menwith Hill. The tranquil rolling green hills of North Yorkshire, England are home to a series of white, ball-like dome buildings called the Menwith Hill Station. Owned by the British Ministry of Defence, the property serves as a Royal Air Force station and extends access to the U.S. Department of Defense via international agreements between the British and American governments, as well as the 1951 NATO Status of Forces Agreement. While the royal government retains land ownership rights to the site, U.S. authorities are responsible for administrating it. Simply put, Menwith Hill is the National Security Agency's largest overseas spying base. Originally used for monitoring Soviet communications during the Cold War, it's now used as part of the agency's vast global surveillance network. Nobody knows for sure what goes on inside the base, despite numerous attempts by journalists and researchers to find out. The British government takes a complete hands-off approach by refusing to comment, citing its policy against discussing national security matters. In 2016, The Intercept allegedly obtained documents revealing the NSA's history of using Menwith Hill as a surveillance headquarters for monitoring communications relating to suspected terrorism in Africa, the Middle East, and remote parts of the world. While these accusations can't necessarily be proven, they are also not outwardly disputed. Even after the allegations came to light, the British government clung steadfastly to its policy of refraining to comment on the goings-on at Menwith Hill, and this approach remains the status quo to this day. Metgor, Russia. Often referred to as Russia's Area 51, Metgor is a closed town located on the banks of the Mali-Inser River, near Mount Yamantau in the Ural Mountains. Founded in 1979, the settlement was formerly called Ufa 105 and Beloretsk 16. Doesn't sound very homey or cozy, right? It received its current name and was granted official town status in 1995. There were 17,352 people living in Metgor in 2010, according to the Russian census. But if you're an ordinary person with no close ties to anyone living there, don't expect to be allowed in. Metgor is reportedly home to a secret nuclear base run by 2 Russian military battalions. Rumor has it that the site houses ballistic missiles that are equipped with sensors that detect nuclear activity, and these weapons can allegedly be remotely and automatically triggered. Whether or not any of this is true remains unconfirmed, but very little is known about Metgor, and the Russian government prefers to keep it that way. By default of its closed status, Metgor is federally administrated and only authorized visitors are allowed in. Many of Russia's closed cities originated prior to the Soviet Union's collapse in 1991. There are often little or no road signs to indicate their locations, and in some cases, closed cities are absent from maps. The government often refrains from officially acknowledging the existence of a closed city, and residents are discouraged from disclosing much information about it to outsiders. In exchange, they tend to receive better living conditions and pay than the status quo outside the city affords. Ise Grand Shrine, Japan. Also known as Ise Jingu, the Ise Grand Shrine is Japan's most sacred Shinto shrine. Nestled in the heart of a dense sacred forest in Ise City in the Mie Prefecture of Honshu Island, the complex of 125 shrines dates back to the 3rd century and is rebuilt every 2 decades to symbolize the Shinto beliefs in rebirth and renewal. The current shrines were built in 2013. The buildings are rebuilt on adjacent properties using the same techniques as the previous shrines and are imitations of their predecessors. Wood from the old buildings is used for the torii, or shrine gate, at the main entrance to the complex, and is also sent to other shrines throughout Japan for reconstructing their buildings. Visitors can see parts of the main buildings from the outside, but they are mostly hidden by fencing, according to a Gaijin Pot blog post by John Asano, and photography is generally not allowed. Only members of the imperial family can enter the inner sanctum, which holds greater importance than the outer shrine. The inner shrine houses the sacred mirror of the emperor, which the sun goddess herself allegedly gifted to Japan's first emperor. Asano wrote that what he could see of the main shrine building represented stunning pre-Buddhist architecture, but that's the most that anyone ordinary can hope to see of the exclusive complex. Woomera Test Range. Situated over 250 miles northwest of Adelaide, the Woomera Prohibited Area, also called the Woomera Test Range, is one of Australia's most restricted areas. 2 of its 3 sections are used for weapons testing, while one extra heavily guarded area, known as the Red Zone, is used year-round by the country's Department of Defense. Altogether, the site occupies a 41,700 square mile area, making it larger than Portugal and classifying it as the world's largest land testing range. It's operated by the Royal Australian Air Force and is heavily patrolled to ensure that no civilians trespass onto the property. Considering what goes on at the Woomera Test Range, including air, ground, and space test activities, it's extremely dangerous for civilians, who are completely barred from entering under almost all circumstances. In late 2018, the South Australian government expressed an interest in exploring the area for deposits of gold and copper, which it believes could be present in the Red Zone. Gaining approval to enter the WPA for non-defense reasons is an arduous process, but it is possible. Mining would be beneficial for Woomera, a town with a population of 150 that is situated in the far north of South Australia, and which could use an economic boost. Thanks for watching! Which place would you like to visit if you could? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you are new here. See you soon! Bye!